So as you all know, when the FCC voted to repeal Title II net neutrality protections, they included a clause in that repeal order that preempts states and prohibits them from enacting their own net neutrality laws. So that was something that the internet service providers actually pressured the FCC to include in that repeal order, because knowing that net neutrality is overwhelmingly popular, these ISPs like Comcast and Verizon knew that once the FCC voted to repeal net neutrality, states would immediately try to enact their own rules, and they're right. So the FCC voted to stop states from doing this. But in spite of that, states are now defying the FCC and effectively giving Ajit Pai the middle finger, and they're still passing their own net neutrality rules. So Sean Captain of Fast Company explains, along with the expected flood of lawsuits by activist groups fighting to preserve net neutrality, states have also taken up the cause. We all agree that in an ideal world, it should be handled at the federal level, says California State Senator Scott Wiener. But if the federal government's going to abdicate, then we need to take action, and I'm glad that a number of states are looking at this. Along with pursuing lawsuits over irregularities in the FCC process, like millions of fake citizen comments being submitted, several states are crafting their own net neutrality laws, which they will start debating as new legislative sessions commence this month. They would prohibit internet service providers from blocking or hindering access to legal online content sources, or from offering premium bandwidth fast lane deals to others. Washington State was first to act, with Democratic and Republican state representatives debuting nearly identical bills back on December 13th and 14th. Regardless of their politics, state net neutrality advocates face a tough course through unfamiliar territory. In its lengthy order abolishing net neutrality policy, the FCC asserted the federal government's right to preempt other laws or policies, allowing state and local governments to adopt their own separate requirements, which could impose far greater burdens than the federal regulatory regime, could significantly disrupt the balance we strike here, reads the FCC's abolition order. Telecommunications in particular, it's very, very hairy to try to do this without triggering federal preemption, says Jake Egloff, the legislative aide to New York Democrat Assemblymember Patricia Fahey. They have also crafted legislation establishing net neutrality requirements rather than regulate ISPs directly. It would exert financial pressure by only allowing the state and local governments to contract with ISPs certified as meeting New York's net neutrality requirements. I don't want to say backdoor, but it is a side door, says Fahey, whose district includes the state capital, Albany. The state's power of the purse is just one of the side door measures her colleague, Hoyleman and California's Wiener are considering. They might also make meeting net neutrality standards a prerequisite for awarding cable franchises or providing access to state-owned land or utility poles for laying cables, and they are looking at the front door approach of regulating ISPs directly under consumer protection law. The FCC issued their fiat that tells the states they can't do anything. We don't think the FCC has the power, and they've lost that argument in court before, says Wiener. So this is really exciting, and this is a gigantic indication that the battle for net neutrality certainly isn't over. It may look like a foregone conclusion because the FCC voted to repeal net neutrality protections, but this is going to be a long battle that we now watch unfold in the courts. Now, it is the case that the FCC did lose this battle in court before, but it's tricky because Donald Trump has appointed a lot of federal judges across the country, and in the event a judge who was appointed by Donald Trump ends up hearing this case, then he or she could invoke the supremacy clause of the Constitution, which basically means that federal law overrides state laws, which would wipe out these state laws. But this isn't guaranteed. It's just one of the many pitfalls in the fight to save net neutrality. But I just love that state legislators are not just rolling over and dying. And they're clever in their approach. They're crafting policy in a way so that they're not necessarily banning internet service providers from violating net neutrality, but they're saying we're not going to do business with you if you don't support our net neutrality laws. And I think it's genius. But not all states are doing it that way. They're just outright banning internet service providers from violating net neutrality. And I love it. This is courageous here. I mean, what do Republicans always say? They always claim to be federalists. They claim that states are laboratories for democracy, so you should let them do what they want to do. The FCC said, no, they don't get to do what they want to do. And now the states are saying, fuck off. We're going to do what the fuck we want to do. And, this is going to be such a long battle. As as we see these lawsuits headed to court, with now 17 states suing the FCC, as we see states making their own laws in defiance of the FCC's preemption laws, the battle is far from over. I sound like a broken record, but I know a lot of you are demoralized right now, and I hear from you all the time. A lot of people send me messages saying, what can we do to fight? I don't want to just hear about the bad and the negative. I want to know what I can do to keep net neutrality and make sure it's still the status quo in America. Well, look, it's now time. If you really want to make a difference, you can write your congressman or woman or your representative. Let them know that they need to sign on to the Congressional Review Act. Really, you should pressure your senator currently to sign on to the CRA. That's really important because they could just simply void what the FCC did. That would be the easiest way. No long legal battle, no fight in states individually. It'd just be null and void like that. I mean, look, that would have to pass in the House as well, but if we could get Congress to pass the nullification of net neutrality via the Congressional Review Act, it would be perfect because the FCC, their hands would be tied. They couldn't do anything. So look, I will keep you guys up to date on this battle, but just know that if you want net neutrality, you've got to fight for it. The battle isn't over just because the FCC voted. The battle begins now officially, and you can still have a say. Call your senator, call your representative, and make your voice heard. This segment of the Humanist Report was brought to you by 7coffeeroasters.com. They're a minority-owned small business in Seattle, and they specialize in roasting unique and delicious coffee that's not actually roasted until you've placed your order. And the best part is that they actually ship out all orders within 24 hours, so you get your coffee and it still tastes fresh when it arrives. And to boot, they're also a progressive company that pays their workers a living wage and actually cares about the country. So to support them and experience the deliciousness of their coffee, you can check out 7coffeeroasters.com.